I know there are a lot of people out there that wish that lightsabers were like real, but honestly, I think most people would just end up like chopping off the tip of their nose, or like a pinky, or some poor sap out there will end up just completely chopping off his tiny little chode. So let's just keep that in the sci-fi universe. We don't need any real live action lightsabers, okay? Just keep your Black Series ones. You're good with that. Anyways, let's get straight into today's video. I actually wanted to talk about the Black Series line, which is something that I probably don't do as much on this particular channel, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that for some unknown reason, the YouTube sphere just doesn't like me making Black Series content, but it's still one of my babies. It's, I grew up watching the Star Wars universe, and so from time to time I'll kind of revisit it and talk about stuff related to the Black Series line as a whole. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about this new kind of subline that that Hasbro is supposed to launch soon, that is supposed to be based in the Star Wars Episode 3 universe. They're going to use that cool like retro style blister bubble plastic style of packaging, which I think looks phenomenal. I think we've already gotten official confirmation that we're getting a Cody in that particular packaging. I personally pre-ordered that through Walmart already, and I'm very, very excited to actually get him in hand and get a closer look at him. And let's just assume that it's going to be on that new 2023 body mold, clone body mold that people constantly jizz over. Now, before we get into that particular conversation, I will say the Black Series line, at least in my personal opinion, is circling the drain. And I know it feels a lot like that with a lot of different lines, but it's for mostly different reasons. Like, I just finished making like 3 to 4 different videos in the last month talking about how NECA is on a downward spiral, but that has more to do with how they handled the line, not necessarily their figures. I think they're still solid. They still have a really good fan base, but it just, how quickly their own fan base turned against them for how they mistreated them. And there are so many other figures that we consistently see, heading towards the clearance section. We have like the sublines from McFarlane, for example, the Page Punchers 4-inch action figures, which just don't sell well for him. But we rarely see something as big as like Star Wars, the Star Wars Black Series line, which back in the day was kind of a home run hitter. Recently, people are just not interested in it. Like the original trilogy, unless you're doing something like a massive update to one of the new body molds, even if it is like a version of a particular character that you've already received, unless it's like a massive upgrade, people are just not going to buy it. Same thing with the Disney Plus live action stuff, or even the animated projects. People just don't seem to get as excited for that type of material or source material. And I'm just going to assume that Hasbro is under contract and they really have no choice. Like, they have to make merchandise based on the newer projects. And don't even get me started on what I like to call the Rey trilogy, which is the newer Disney Star Wars films that just completely flopped and people just did not like. They didn't like any of the characters, and I remember seeing a lot of those Black Series action figures based in that trilogy just go for pennies on the dollar. I remember seeing them for as low as like $3 to $5. Again, this is the 6-inch Black Series line. It's not one of like their sublines. It's not the retro line. It's not even the Star Wars vintage line. Like, this is the big heavy hitter. This is the home run hitter for Hasbro in terms of the Star Wars universe, and it just hasn't been selling well. I consistently see it on sale through big Toy Store, Entertainment Earth, Amazon, here locally at Ross, Burlington, or just in the clearance section at, your local Walmart or Target. It's honestly a really bad scene for Hasbro or for Star Wars or Disney just in general. And a lot of their newer merchandise has just not been selling. There are a lot of videos out there that cover this pretty extensively, but that's not what today's video is about. I actually want to talk about how I feel like this line is or could be the savior for just the Black Series line or just Disney merchandise in general, just because I feel like for the most part, and interestingly enough, what seems to sell mostly for Star Wars merchandise has to be the prequel trilogy as well as the animated series. I'm not sure why that is. Don't ask me. Even though the original trilogy is considered to be the best trilogy or the best source material ever, the prequel trilogy just seems to kind of tug at the nostalgia feels for a lot of people, and they just kind of gravitate way more towards it, and that seems to sell pretty consistently, especially the Clone Wars area. There's kind of like a little bit of a, or I shouldn't say a little bit, a huge cult following behind that particular project, and people just love that era of the Star Wars universe, or the entire timeline. So like I said, I think this particular line could, or this wave could potentially save the Star Wars universe. And what's interesting to me is usually what's their biggest heavy hitter for the Black Series line, they tend to make it store exclusives for some unknown reason. Like there, and I continue to go back to that Clone Wars little wave that they had as a Target exclusive, where it was like Obi-Wan, Anakin, the clone pilot Hawk, clone trooper, as well as I believe it was a Captain Rex that was included in that little wave. And it sold extremely well. Like people were, jumping over each other trying to get these particular figures, and they completely sold out, and we haven't seen them yet re-released. I mean, we have seen iterations or versions of those particular characters, but we haven't actually seen them re-release in that original packaging, because people love what packages it comes in, I guess. And I think this line could benefit extensively from being released in a time frame where a lot of people are just really low on Black Series collectibles as a whole. Now, we are, like as I said, we are already confirmed a Cody. The pre-orders are up there through Walmart, but I still believe that there's a lot of meat left on the bone. And even though most of these are going to be re-releases of characters that we've already seen, but I still believe that there's some meat on the bone. There's still some merit there. We could potentially see like an Anakin with an updated, maybe like a lower half, maybe updated legs, ankles, or even hell, give us a brand new body mold for Anakin. Same thing with Obi-Wan in that beautiful episode 3 package. Maybe we even get like an alternate head sculpt for Anakin, once he starts going over to the dark side, when he gets like those really weird emo looking eyes. I would love to have like 2 different head sculpts so you can portray him at the beginning of the film as well as the end. So there, right there, you already have 2 big heavy hitters. I will say what Hasbro doesn't do with this little wave is release just anything. Okay, these should only be heavy hitters if you're trying to save the line, if you're trying to get back on track and get people really intrigued and interested in the line. You definitely don't want to have like a random Padme in this particular wave, or like a Jar Jar Binks. I get it, those are 2 big heavy hitters. I love Padme, I want an extra one in my display, but they just don't sell as well as like core members or those type of characters that have a really big following. And I don't know if we want necessarily another version of Padme. I don't know if we need another Jar Jar Binks, even though we should be getting a Jar Jar Binks like every year, just for the sake of it, because he is one of the best characters. But again, does he sell well on the shelves? I don't think so. So you should only keep it to like core member characters that like absolutely fly off the shelves. Now, we did receive, I believe the last Mace window that we got was like the episode 1 retro carded, which was like a fan channel exclusive, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but it was like an updated version of Mace Windu, but that was a few years ago. I definitely feel like we're due a new Mace Windu. He is a very key and important figure in that entire episode 3, really the entire prequel era, and he is, in my personal opinion, the best Jedi and probably the most powerful one, because he took, Darth Sidious on by himself. Now, we just received a Kiadu Mundi, so I think we're good on that front. But again, we could potentially see them go back, maybe even give us a Count Dooku. I know he's technically not really featured that predominantly in episode 3. He does get his head sliced off by Anakin within like the first few minutes of it, but he is a very key figure in the prequel trilogy. And I think it's very important for people to watch that, like that little short that they had not too long ago. Was it the Jedi Tales or something along those lines, where they actually feature Count Dooku kind of betraying the Jedi Order and becoming a part, or becoming a Sith Lord eventually. That one, I think, gave him a really cool backstory and kind of showed Count Dooku and how powerful he was even as a Jedi. But again, we did receive the original Count Dooku, like maybe 7-8 years ago, somewhere along those lines. It's a really old figure, outdated tech. Maybe they could give us a new one with like pinless technology, newer articulation, even if they had to reuse a body mold from a pre-existing action figure. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, unfortunately, we already have a lot of characters that were featured predominantly in episode 3. And so it's kind of difficult to get these in that particular packaging. Like, a lot of people are going to feel like Hasbro is just trying to cash in on the episode 3 title alone. And so some characters we've already seen are certain army builders. Like, we do have the regular battle droid, we have the super battle droid, we have the super commando droid, we even have the droid decas that were launched not too long ago. So all of those like key army builders already exist. I'm not sure if Hasbro would like to re-release those, maybe with slightly updated tech somewhere along the lines, or just re-release them in like that beautiful packaging. Maybe certain people just feel nostalgic and want to pick them up, or certain people did not pick up the original release and maybe want to actually jump in on this particular release. So it's just a matter of personal perspective. I think they're probably going to stay away from army builders just because it feels like everything that they could make has already been made there. General Grievous is another interesting character because I think we've already seen that particular body mold like 3 to 4 different times. They had like a battle damage Gamerverse one, if I'm not mistaken. They had the 2D Clone Wars version, which was like white, all white, I believe. And then they had the original Black Series release. So I think that particular body mold we've already seen a plethora of different times. They could decide to re-release it maybe. And like I said, just slightly updated body molds or updated features, things of that nature. But that one is probably kind of a pipe dream just because it feels like that one's a really difficult figure to put together. It feels like there's way too much engineering that goes on with that figure just because of how complex the articulation or the sculpt work is overall. We just got a Gree and Yoda 2-pack as well, so I'm not sure if they would want to put an updated Gree in a single pack format. That kind of sounds pretty smart. Like, they've already done the 2-pack. Now we're going to do an updated 2023 clone body for Gree, and then maybe an updated Yoda. I'm not sure. I think we've already gotten way too many Yodas within the past few years, and maybe they want to kind of shy away from doing another Yoda. But again, for me personally, if this is going to be the line that brings it back to like its former glory, I think you have to do nothing but heavy hitters. You can't throw in like, you know, B or C list characters. It has to be core members, people that are going to recognize in store shelves and, you know, want to purchase it. Now, the other big thing, and this is, I'm hoping that this isn't some sort of store exclusive. So far, the Cody was a Walmart store exclusive, which already gives me like the really bad feels. So I'm hoping that they decide to make it a more mainline release, or at least a fan channel exclusive. That way more and more people are able to get their hands on them. And then obviously we could have just a plethora of different clone troopers. Maybe we could have a 501 trooper. I already mentioned Gree and Cody, but they could continue just expanding, giving us anybody that was featured as a clone in episode 3. And then just, even if they were already released within the last few years, they could just easily just port it onto that 2023 body mode, give us an updated version with a newer tech, and then just release it on that beautiful episode 3 packaging. And I think that alone would help sales you know, extremely well. So as I said, this is just my personal opinion, my personal take. I feel like this little line this little wave could potentially bring back the Black Series line, just because it's going to be about the nostalgia. It's going to be about getting maybe older collectors that haven't collected Black Series line so far, maybe because, you know, back then, if you had like the Clone Wars packaging, which was a reuse for that Target exclusive release, if you're getting packages like that, it might bring in people that were only collecting the 3 3/4 inch back then, you know, because that's what the original packaging was meant for that particular scale. And so if you're using that for the Black Series line, there may be some people, some old school collectors that will come back just for that particular packaging because it brings them back to their childhood or their early days in collecting. But again, I could be completely wrong. This could be a complete miss, or they could just be really hard to find, kind of how the Target exclusive Clone Wars stuff was. But I'm hoping that they make it, you know, semi obtainable for everybody, because I do feel like this is a seller. This is something that people will gravitate toward. Episode 3 is one of those that just sells out incredibly well. Anakin always sells well, especially from that time era, and so does Obi-Wan, who, you know, has a multiple different versions from that like episode 3 and Clone Wars era that people just absolutely love when he's wearing like his clone attire or his commander attire. So As I said, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you guys agree with me? Could this potentially be the savior wave that saves the Black Series line? I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but bear with me. Do you guys think that this is the case? Let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoy this type of rambling content, make sure to stay tuned. We do upload like 4 to 5 times on a weekly basis. As always, stay safe out there and make sure you enjoy the hobby. You know, pose your figures, just play around with them, enjoy them, because that's the most important part of all this. If you're not doing it, then you're just not doing it right, I guess. Stay safe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.